I don't think so. They will. They'll just sit across as far away from you as they possibly can and glare. Claire, I couldn't remember if you guys normally sit in that row or the row behind. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. I have to say, whenever I put on a talid and everyone gets quiet, I always feel like it's a lot of pressure, like I've really got to deliver now, like I have to say something deep and wise. So I'll just, I guess I'll, rolling with that, I'll encourage everybody to take a good deep breath in. There you go. And a nice breath out. And in so doing, we think about, I think, breathing out the ruach of our week and breathing in something new. Perhaps the added soul of Shabbat that we think of in the words of the poem there on our left-hand margin on page 10. Speaking of page 10, we'll turn to page 10, and we'll begin our service tonight with Yedid Nefesh. Why not do something different? Yedid Nefesh, page 10. Yedid Nefesh of Harachaman, Mishoch Avdach Eretzonach, Yarutz Avdach Gemo Ayal, Yishachaveh mul hadarach, ki yerav lo yedidutach, minofetz uf vechotam, hadur nae, ziv haolam, nafshi cholat avatach, Ana el narfanala beharot lach noam zivach az titchazeik v'titrapei v'hayet halach shichat olam v'tik yehemu rachamecha V'chusna ben ohavach, ki ze kama nichsof nichsav, lirob tiferet uzach, ana eli machmad libi, chushana ve'al titalam, Higalena ufros chaviv alai etzukat shelomach ta'ir eret mikvodach nagila v'nismecha bach maherahu kivamoed V'chaneini ki me'olam Yada da 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 hi da hi Yada da 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 hi Page 11. Let's read this one responsively. Let us go and sing to Adonai. Let us trumpet praise to our protector. Filled with thanks, let us greet God, raising our voice in song. Come then, let us bow and kneel. Let us bend our knees in the presence of Adonai, who formed us. Page 12. If only you would listen today to God's voice and not become hard-hearted like the people at Merivah, like that time at Massah in the desert when your ancestors tried me and tested me, though they had seen what I had wrought. Page 13. Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru miyom leyom yeshuato, sapru v'goyim kevodo bechol ha'amim niflotav, ki gadol Adonai, ומהולל מאוד, נורהו על כל אלוהים, אילי כי כל אלוהי העמים אלילים, ואדוני שמיים עשה, הוד והדר לפניו, עוז ותפארת במקדשו, הבו לאדוני משפחות עמים, הבו לאדוני כבוד ועוז, הבו לאדוני כבוד שמו, שאו מנחה ובואו לחצרותיו, אילי השתחוו לאדוני בהדרת קודש, חילו מפניו כל הארץ, אמרו בגויים אדוני מלך, אף תיכון תבל בל תימות, ידין עמים במשרים, ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ, ירם הים ומלואו, יעלו שדי וכל אשר בו, אילי אז ירננו כל עצי יער לפני אדוני, קיבה לשפוט הארץ, ישפוט תבל בצדק ועמים באמונתו, ידי די 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 We'll read the following psalm responsively on pages 15 silently on pages 15 and 16. Adonai melech tagil haaretz, yismechu im rabim. O have Adonai sinura, shomer nafshot chasidav, miyar reshaim yatzileim, or zaru el atzadik u'lishrei lev, simcha, simchu tzadikim b'Adonai, ve'odu lezecher kodsho. Page 17. Mizmor shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, ki niflaot asa, הושיע לו ימינו וזרוע קודשו אלי הודיע אדוני ישועתו לעיני הגויים גילה צדקתו זכר חסדו ואמונתו לבית ישראל ראו כל אפסי הארץ את ישועת אלוהינו הריעו לאדוני כל הארץ פיתחו ורננו וזמרו זמרו לאדוני בכינור וכל זמרה בחצות רוד וכל שופר הריעו לפני המלך אדוני ירם הים ומלואו תבל ויושביבה נהרות ימחאו כף יחד הרים ירננו לפני אדוני קיבה לשפוט הארץ ישפוט תבל בצדק ועמים במישרים. We'll read pages 19 and 20 responsively and a loud voice. Claire, can you read B'kol Ram, b'vakasha? Adonai reigns.
Adonai reigns, nations tremble. The one enthroned amidst the cherubim makes the world quake.
Adonai is great in Zion. Above all nations, they shall acknowledge your name, saying, Great, awe-inspiring, Holy One.
A sovereign strength lies in the love of justice, and you forge the paths of truth, judging Jacob righteously and justly.
Exalt Adonai our God. Bow down before God, the Holy One.
Moses and Aaron among God's priests, and Samuel among those who called upon the divine name, called to you, and you answered them. You spoke to them from amidst the cloud. They kept your covenant and the law you gave them. You answered them, Adonai our God. You were a forgiving God to them, even as you punished them for their transgressions.
Exalt Adonai our God and bow down at God's holy mountain, for Adonai our God is holy. Page 21, we continue with Psalm 29, Mizmor David, the last of our series of psalms here before Lecha Dodi, and we're on page 21. Which one do we do? There we go. Mizmor David, havu l'Adonai bnei Elim, havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, havu l'Adonai kavod shemo, yisachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh, kol Adonai al hamayim, el hakavod hirim, Adonai al mayim rabim, kol Adonai ba'koach, kol Adonai be'adar, kol Adonai shover arazim, vayishaber Adonai et arzei halvanon, vayarkidem kmo egel Levanon, ve'siryon kmo ven re'emim, kol Adonai chotzev lahavot esh, kol Adonai yachil Adonai midbar kadesh, kol Adonai yecholel ayalot, vayechsof ye'arot, uveichalo kulo omer kavod, kulo omer kavod. Adonai lamabul yashav, vayeshev Adonai melech leolam, Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. We will turn to page 23. We'll continue with Lecha Dodi. We will do the first 5 verses in one melody, and we'll switch after that. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabla. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabla. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad ishmi'anu el hamiyuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shem l'tiferet v'lithilah lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabla likrat Shabbat lechu v'nei l'chakim kor haberacha merosh מקדם נסוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה קומי צאי מתוך הפך הרב לך שבט בעמק הבכה והוא יחמול עלייך חמלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה התנערי מעפר קומי לבשי בגדי תפארתך מעל יד בן ישי בית הלחמי קרבי נפשי גאלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה התעוררי כי באורך קומי אורי 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 שיר דברי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לא תבושי ולא תקלמי מה תשתוכחי ומה תמיבך יחסו עניי עמי ונבנתה עירתי לה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה והיהודים שיסה שוסייך ורחקו כל מבלייך יסיס עלייך אלוהייך כמסוס חתן על כלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה ימין ושמאל תפרוצי ואת אדוני תריצי על ידי איש פן פרצי ונשמחה ונגילה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה ובצלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי חלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה. We'll be seated and turn to page 27 as we continue with Psalm 92, a psalm for Shabbat. Let's read this one responsively. Henry, could you lead us? No? Okay. Diana?
It is good to thank you, Adonai, and sing to your name, Most High, to proclaim your love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night.
Finger the lute, pluck the harp, let the sound of the lyre rise up.
Bless me with your deeds, Adonai, and I shall sing of your handiwork.
How wonderful are your works, Adonai, how subtle your designs.
The arrogant do not understand, the fool does not comprehend this. The wicked flourish like grass, and every evildoer blossoms, only to be destroyed
But you, Adonai, are exalted for all time.
Surely your enemies, Adonai, surely your enemies will perish. All who commit evil will be scattered.
As a wild bull raises up its horn, you raised my head high, anointed it with fresh oil.
As my enemies gather against me, my days remain steady. My ears listen and hear.
The righteous flourish like the date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of Adonai, they flourish in our God's courtyards.
In old age they remain fruitful, still fresh and bountiful. Proclaiming Adonai is upright, my rock is
Page 29. We'll read this one silently. Adonai malach ge'uth lavesh, lavesh, Mikolot ma'im rabim adirim mishperayam adir b'marom Adonai Eidotechanenu me'od v'itchana v'kodesh Adonai l'orech yamim. Kaddish Yatom is on page 30. If you are reciting, do we have anyone here who's reciting Kaddish? Okay. In that case, we can push that off till the final Kaddish at the end of our service. I will invite everyone to please rise on page 39A. There we go. Page 39A for Baruch Hu. Making sure I didn't miss something. I did not miss it. Okay, good. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. You may be seated. We continue individually with the first blessing before Shema. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim b'chokhmah Uma'avir yom u'mevi laila u'mavdil ben yom u'vein laila Adonai tzvaot shemo el chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. Page 40. Ahavat olam beit Yisrael amachavta Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadata Al kein Adonai Eloheinu b'shochveinu v'kumeinu נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגע יומם ולילה יומם ולילה ואהבתך תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך והיה Adonai Elohechem Emes. Please join me on page 43 in the English. This is our enduring affirmation binding on us, that Adonai is our God and there is none other, and we, Israel, are God's people. God is our sovereign, redeeming us from earthly rulers, delivering us from the hand of all tyrants, bringing judgment upon our oppressors and just retribution upon all our mortal enemies, performing wonders beyond understanding and marvels beyond all reckoning. God places us among the living, not allowing our steps to falter, and leads us past the false altars of our enemies, exalting us above all those who hate us. Adonai avenged us with miracles before Pharaoh, offered signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. God smote in anger all of Egypt's firstborn, brought Israel from its midst to lasting freedom, and led them through the divided water of the Sea of Reeds. As their pursuers and enemies drowned in the depths, God's children beheld the power of the divine. They praised and acknowledged God's name. U'malchuto beratzon kibelu alehem Moshe u'Miriam u'bnei Yisrael lecha anu shira b'simcha rabba ve'amru chulam mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh nora tehilot osef ele yalai lalai lai yalai lalai yalai lalai lalai yalai lalai yalai machutecha ra'u vanecha bokei hayam lifnei Moshe ze Eli anu ve'amru Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed yanai lalai lai yalalai yalalai lai yalalai ve'ne'emar kifada Adonai et Yaakov ugalo miyad chazak mimenu baruch ata Adonai gal Yisrael. Page 45. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chayim v'chos aleinu sukat shalom. Ushmor tzeitenu vo'enu lechayim u'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha baruch ata Adonai hapurei sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Page 46, please rise. V'shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam elai b'ni u'ven b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash Yikadav yitkadash merabah B'alma divra kiruteh ve'amlich malchuteh V'chayechonu v'yomechonu v'chayei dechol b'beit Yisrael Ba'agala u'vizman kariv V'imru Amen Yehe shemer Abba mevarach La'alam la'alme alamaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei kudusha b'richu le'ela min kol bechata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata damiran ma'alama v'imru amen. Silent Amidah begins on page 47. You may be seated when you're finished. Please rise and turn to page 53 as we continue now with the symbolic recapitulation of the Amidah. ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם ויחל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה וישפוט ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי ויקדש אותו כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor VeHanora El Elyon Konei Shamayim Va'aretz Magen Avot Bidbaro Mechaye Metim B'mamaro Ha'el HaKadosh En Kamohu Hameniach Le'amo B'yom Shabbat Kodsho Kivam Ratza Le'aniach Lahem Kivam Ratza Le'aniach Lahem לפניו נעבוד ביראה ופחד ונודה לשמו בכל יום תמיד מעון הברכות אל ההודעות אדון השלום מקדש השבת ומברך שביעי ומניח בקדושה למדו שני עונג זכר למעשה בראשית. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu ritzei v'imnuchatenu kadeshenu b'mitzvotecha v'tein chelkenu b'toratecha sabeinu mituvecha v'samchenu b'yeshuatecha v'taher libeinu le'abdecha be'emet v'hanchilenu Adonai Eloheinu Be'ava uvratzon Shabbat kodshecha Ve'yanuchu va'Yisrael Mekadeshei shemecha Baruch ata Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה ולמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חורף וימי חורף חי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעלם לעלמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. תתקבל סלוטה דברו לכל ישראל קדם אבן ושמיה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום הרבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום הוא יעשה שלום שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל יעשה שלום הוא יעשה שלום שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל יעשה שלום שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל יעשה שלום שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו amen. As if I'm making kiddush on someone else's behalf, I should not only turn around and face them, but also make eye contact with them as I say, Savri. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon inchilanu zikaron le'masei v'reishit ki hu yom techila le'mikrei kodesh zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim ki vanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon inchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat. Is that Uzo? No, I don't. Pinot Grigio. It looked a little pale. I was expecting red, so it was good. It was good. Thank you. It'll keep me warm on the walk home. Page 56. We continue with the later. Wait, before we'll continue with the later. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol latet gedula liyotzer bereishit shelo asanu kigoyei ha'aratzot velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama shelo sam chelkeinu kahem וגורלנו ככל המונם ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שמונת השמיים ויסר הארץ ומה שפיגון על כן נקווה לך אדוני אלוהינו ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד We turn now to Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish, on page 58. As we do, I want to note that today, this Shabbat, we do not have any Yortzites being observed on the date itself, at least not on my congregational list. But in the remainder of the week, we will be observing those of Erwin Candell, Justin Gallen, Ray Euster, Marjorie Opengart, Abe Zorndorf, Morris Freeman, Edward Seaman, Edith Summer, mother of Elaine, who's with us tonight, Frida Efron, Avery Gerald Stoller, Florence Litz, Barbara Gottesman, William Norton Dember, Walter Schnurr, and Herman Weiner. In addition, we think at this time of those we've lost in our congregation over the course of the last year, the last 11 months. Among those we remember are Frank Grossman, George Fisher, Selma Cohn, Lori Gupp, Ben Koff, Matt Yosefat, Peter Gabor, Sandy Richards, Kay Gaines, Irv Zipperstein, Elaine Nevins, Joan Dane, Eileen Hodesh, June Howard, Pam Simowitz-Weber, Hal Schneider, and Rosemary Bloom, and Gerald Sapidin as well. If there's anyone you are remembering here whom I did not name, I will invite you to share a name with us. Mourner's Kaddish is on page 58. Those who are reciting and those who may be joining us on the stream who are reciting, invite you to join me at this time. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabba ba'alama divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayei chon u'v'yomei chon u'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mavarach la'alam u'lalamei alamaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei d'kudsha b'richu La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran ba'alama v'imru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Asay shalom b'imromav hu ya'asay shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. We would turn now to announcements. And Connie, since you're here, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
never on the spot. Just Shabbat Shalom to everybody here and everybody on the live stream. I'm looking forward to listening to our guest speaker tonight, Rabbi Krauss, and who is also the head of Judaic Studies at the University of Cincinnati. Having been here during the week, I'm always amazed at the buzz of activity that takes place here, and this past week was no exception. From morning to night, you could see people here. We have a special activity tomorrow as we welcome Alex Levinson as he becomes bar mitzvah. As you've probably read, COVID has struck its ugly head again, and so while the service will go on, Alex's father, Aaron, will not be able to join us. He has been affected by COVID. But anyway, there will be festivities all weekend. We look forward to seeing everyone.
Thank you. It was almost enough tap dancing for me to find what I was looking for. Is it up there? I feel like somebody moved something, but Normally it resides right on usually it's right on the Amud here, and I don't have it. Because I'm not off the hook. I was going to announce, since this is our first Friday of the month, we normally announce the anniversaries of the month. And among those anniversaries, there are a couple of people that you might recognize in this room. Celebrating anniversaries this month are Barry and Laurel Wolfson, Keith and Shelley Sklar, Vic and Sue Amster, Lisa and Jonathan Bernstein, Orly and Steve Rumberg, Renee and Eli Roth, excuse me, that's what I do when I just read. Claire and Matt Lee, Jason and Courtney Ackerman, and also Dan and Irene Randolph. Claire and Matt, will you tell us how many years? 44. Well, in a bad Hebrew pun, I could tell you that you'd have to be mad. Yeah. There's not, I can't do anything good with dam, so at least hopefully you haven't drawn blood from one another. We hope that your 44 years, we are sure that your 44 years have been wonderful, and wish you however many it takes to get to 120 from 44. I can't do the quick one. 76, which is the number of trombones that were in the big parade, so there you go. So that's back to music. I'm sure it has been harmonious, melodious. I was looking for the little sheet that lives up here on this desk for the very purpose of me reading an anniversary blessing to you. So as it is MIA, on account of helper elves, I will wish you a Mazal Tov, and pray that you will be blessed with many more years of happiness and joy, and maybe some more grandchildren, who knows? Mazal Tov. I'm not pressuring, I'm just saying. Okay, so we will conclude our service with Yigdal before I invite our speaker, Rabbi Dr. Matthew Krauss, forward to speak to us on a topic that's good for the lead up to the high holidays. So I'll let you introduce the topic in a little more detail, but martyrdom plays a role, or the martyrdom stories we talk about in our as Krauss. So yes, indeed. Page 62, Yigdal. I'm gonna keep hammering home my favorite melody on this one. This is, I think, I call it in my head the West End Synagogue melody, but I'm not sure if that's the best name for it. In any case. יגדל אלוהים חי וישתבח, נמצא ואין עד אל מציאותו, אחד ואין יחיד כי ייחודו, נעלם וגם אין סוף לאחדותו, אין לו דמות הגוף ואינו גוף, לא נערוך אליו קדושתו, קדמון לכל דבר אשר נברא, ראשון ואין ראשית לראשיתו, הינו אדון עולם וכל נוצר, יורה גדולתו ומלכותו, שפע נבואתו נתנו, אלא אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו, לא קם בישראל כמו שעוד, נביא ומביט את תמונתו, תורת אמת נתן לעמואל, על יד נביאו נאמן ביתו, לא יחליף האל ולא ימיר דתו, לעולמים לזולתו, צופה ויודע סתרנו, מביט לסוף דבר בקדמתו, גומל איש חסד כמפעלו, נותן לרשע רע כרישתו, ישלח לקט ימין משיחנו, לפדות מחקקת ישועתו, מתים יחייל ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדי עד שם תהילתו, מתים יחייל ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדי עד שם תהילתו. tfilato. The psalm. You remembered. Good catch. Psalm 27. It's our first Friday night of the new month. Caught me off guard. We'll turn back to
59.
Page 59. Thank you very much. We'll sing the bolded lines together, but the rest we'll recite individually. Achalti meit Adonai otavakesh. Achalti meit Adonai otavakesh. Shivti b'veit Adonai kol yemei chayai. Lachazot benoam Adonai ulvakir b'heichalo. Lachazot benoam Adonai ulvakir b'heichalo. Ki zbnei bazukum. Lulehem anti lirob tu varonai beretz chayim kavel Adonai chazak v'yametz libecha v'kavel Adonai. We will now invite Rabbi Dr. Matthew Krauss forward to both introduce his topic, because it had a longer title than I think my brain can hold right now, and because I don't want to do it any injustice in recalling it incompletely. So I've known Dr. Krauss as a colleague and sometimes advisor in certain ways when I was a student at HUC. And I also know him as just sort of an all-around smart guy who knows things, lots of things, many things dealing with medieval history and Jewish life and some classics and how these things intersect. So for me, a great phone-a-friend to have for a number of different questions and resources, or questions and issues that might come up. And whenever he teaches something and I get a chance to be there, I'm always happy about that. So I'm happy tonight.
I need to get the handout and the Machzor.
Oh, yes, and we have copies of the Machzor. If you didn't already get one on the way in, we have copies of the Machzor and the handout right in the lobby just outside of the sanctuary. They won't see the hand.
Wait for everyone to get a copy of the handout and their Machzor.
We'll see.
Yeah, because we'll be having people read. So. Well, last week we started classes at UC, and I had to wear my mask because of various diseases going around in my family. So But then I noticed that the students were laughing at my jokes. So I thought, okay, this week I'll try teaching without with my mask off. It wasn't the mask. So anyway, so it's the month of Elul, and which will be ending with the coming of the Yamim HaNoraim, the holy days, the high holy days. And I wanted to talk about one aspect of the high holy days that is a part of the Musaf, or in the afternoon service. This section called Eila as Kara, as a way of thinking about it perhaps in a different way, and maybe it becoming very meaningful for us as we do this part of our liturgy this year. Now, Eila as Kara is actually these I recall, and if you want to, we'll be looking at some of the sections, at least the way Lev Shalem deals with it. It's on page 337 in the Masors. So Eila es Kara is actually a medieval poem or piyut, but it's based on Talmudic teachings and a collection of martyrdom stories, the Aseret Harugim, the 10 rabbis who were slaughtered during the time of Hadrian and the Bar Kokhba revolt. And our tradition had some problems with this recitation of martyrs. One issue challenges that, and that also challenges us today, is the reason why there were 10 martyrs was because it was a punishment for the 10 brothers who sold Joseph into Egypt. This is a rabbinic trope. And Tziduk Hadin, this was the just punishment of these rabbis. And so it's a rather severe thing, and if some of you may remember, these are very gruesome stories. And I'm kind of grateful that, well, it's important to read them, but we do it once a year. We don't have to look at them every day, and we don't generally teach them in religious school. Kind of scary for kids. But, and then the other issue is this, for contemporary sensibilities, the idea of people dying on behalf of their religion, we know it's a concept, but it's something today that doesn't quite resonate with, say, Enlightenment thinking, and so it's something that can be texts and stories that we struggle with. So what I want to look at is actually a little bit of some of the ways in which, first of all, what's uniquely Jewish about our martyrdom stories, and the second is what are the characteristics of martyrdom stories in general? But the second thing is also a lot of martyrdom stories are very popular in Christianity. So that's one area that we're going to focus as a comparison with the Jewish stories that will help elicit how we deal with these narratives. And by the way, one of the reasons why this piyut became popular in the Middle Ages, it was associated with what's called the Akedah story, familiar with the sacrifice of Isaac. In some versions, and in the Middle Ages, he actually dies, and he becomes a paradigm of the martyr. And so these stories of Jews dying on behalf of the religion was something that was associated with the story of Isaac, and some martyrdom narratives then began to develop of people who died in the Crusades as well. So it's also a tradition to add other martyrs to the 10 rabbis. So the first example I wanted to look at actually, by the way, people dying on behalf of the religion, it's not just unique to Judaism, and even predates, we're not the first ones to have what some scholars have called noble death, that is dying for a higher cause. And so the first example I wanted to look at, and we're going to be reading these texts, and don't worry, this is from a collection of martyrdom narratives, and it has a lot of commentaries and notes and introductions. We're not going to be reading from the whole thing, just the actual text. So the first text comes from a story some people may be familiar with from Greek tradition. This is a play by Euripides based on a story associated with the Trojan War. The Greeks are traveling to Troy to take back Helen, and the leader of the Trojan army, the Greek army, is Agamemnon. didn't really have a very nice life, I have to say, although he did win the Trojan War, but that was probably one of the more positive things. Anyway, I won't go into Agamemnon and but on the way, they stop at Alice and an island, and their ships can't sail any further to make it to Troy, and so the prophet, the oracle, tells Agamemnon that he can't leave until he sacrifices his daughter Iphigenia, and so this is a selection from Iphigenia. Talking and explaining and justifying why she's willing to die so that the Greeks can actually go and attack Troy. And you all know Euripides, right? The famous, he's a famous Greek tragedian with Sophocles and Aeschylus. You know how Sophocles actually had his chiton was torn, and he went to the Greek tailor, and the tailor said, Euripides, Eumenides. Okay, fine. It was, oh, you know that one. Okay, it's kind of an old, all right. So let's have a volunteer to read the words of Iphigenia. You don't want to hear my voice the whole time. I mean, this is Greek tragedy. I actually bring a group of students. We go to Athens and we read, actually we don't read this, we read Philoctetes in the theater of Dionysus. It's very exciting. And we're looking at page, we'll see where it says page 1, and it says translation, Mother, listen to my words.
Mother, listen to my words. There's no reason for you to be angry with your husband. To endure the impossible is not easy. It's right to praise the stranger for his willingness to help. But you too have to see. He should not be set against the army. You would win nothing while he meets misfortune. Listen, Mother, to what I have been thinking. I've decided to die. I'm going to do this gloriously by yielding and doing away with my low-mindedness. Come, Mother, look at it with my eyes and see how nobly I sleep. All of majestic Hellas looks upon me now. It is through me that the ships will be able to sail, and the Phrygians will find their grave. And if barbarians do something to women in the future, it is through me that they will be prevented from seizing them from back to Hellas, since they will have paid the price for Helena's ruin from Paris. All this I will secure by dying, and mine will be the blissful glory that I brought Hellas free. It does not befit me to cling too much to life. You, Mother, brought me forth not for yourself alone, but for all Greeks. Yet countless men, armed with their shields, myriads of them holding their oars, have the courage to act upon the enemies and die for Hellas, because their homeland was wrong. And should one life, mine, be reason to prevent all this? Would that be just? Could I say a word in my defense? There are other reasons as well. It's not right that this man should go to war against all Greeks and die because of a woman. It's better that one man sees the daylight than 10,000 women. And if Artemis wants to receive my body, should I, a mortal, try to hinder the goddess? That is impossible. I offer my body for Hellas. Sacrifice me and destroy Troy. That will be my monument for ages to come. That will be my children, my husband, my glory. It is proper, Mother, that Greeks rule over barbarians, and not barbarians over Greeks, because the ones are slaves and the others free.
So first, any questions about this text? Anything that needs clarification? Phrygians are Trojans, and Hellas refers to Greece. Right? So, what are some of the elements that you notice about why she's willing to sacrifice her life? Mm-hmm.
Well, something we like to call internalized misogyny.
Mm-hmm.
That her life is somehow less valuable than that of men. Even at 10,000, that's pretty remarkable.
May I ask for those of us who are hard of hearing?
Yes. So the point is, there's this internal misogyny that she's internalized herself, that she thinks her life is worthless, and compared to men's life, the male life. Okay. So I'll just repeat the questions then, or answers. All right. So, and by the way, notice, right? Notice that related to that internalization of her own lack of worth as a woman, this is a Greek conceit, is that actually this is a way to make her life worthwhile in a male patriarchal society. Okay. So, yeah. What else? What else is she going to gain from dying to... Excellent. So she will have immortality. The Greeks call this kleos. This is a big thing in Greek culture, to have fame and glory. And it's associated with immortal, to be on the tongues of human beings for time immemorial. Yep.
What's the backstory? Why does the commander assure that if he sacrifices his daughter?
So there's a soothsayer, Calchas, and says this is what you have to do. Artemis is very upset with you, and you have to sacrifice your daughter and to alleviate, to placate her. It's the same. I think, as I recall, it's the same soothsayer at the beginning of the Iliad that also gets Agamemnon mad. Too. It's just, notice, yeah, go ahead.
There's a definite ring of feminism in this, where she's really speaking for all women who have been oppressed by all men.
So, while functioning within that patriarchal world, she is actually, in some ways, subverting it too by gaining glory for woman as a woman. By the way, Euripides is particularly unique in this. He also wrote, if you know, like the Bacchae and the Medea. Medea actually has an argument with Jason, which is more difficult, to go to war or to give birth to a child. And she argues very strenuously that giving birth to a child is much more painful. But anyway, so yes, absolutely, yes.
I'm struck by her willingness to die so that another woman lives.
Yeah, so very noble, and that's part of her. So you're struck that she's willing to die and so that another woman can live. Very noble, and that's her role as the daughter of the primary king of leading the Greeks. I don't want to belabor this too much, but also notice that, because I want to move on, but notice that also she also wants to follow the will of the gods, in this case Artemis, and so there's a degree of piety here as well. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure that I see any sense that there is something after life.
So, yeah.
It's not going to a better world.
So there's no sense that she's going to a better world. It's likely she could go to the Elysium fields and hang out there, but the immortality, as we've already noted, is to be famous. By the way, so we'll move on to the next one, but in a nutshell, Achilles has to choose whether to die young and be famous or live a long life and not have any fame at all. And so he chooses actually fame, kleos, and dies young. If you go to the Odyssey, read the Odyssey, Odysseus visits him in the underworld, and Achilles says, "Yeah, that was dumb." I'm not kidding. He really says, "Yeah, I should not have done that. That was very bad." And it's kind of the point of the Odyssey is that Odysseus figures out a way. It takes a while, but he actually has both, right? Fame and gets to go home and live a long life. All right. So, but good. We've highlighted some of these important points, but I want you to see these are these structures, and also notice that it fits very much in the Greek view, right? She's supporting a Greek view of the world. Their victory over Troy, victory of Greeks over barbarians, the this notion of bringing fame to women who normally don't merit it in a Greek society. So the martyrdom does connect to the broader, you could say, national aspirations and the national values of this people. All right, so now let's get to really the first Jewish martyrdom narrative. That's on page 3 on the handout. Okay. This comes from the second book of Maccabees. Now, there's 2 books of Maccabees that describe the rise of the Hasmoneans and the recapture of the temple and reconsecration of it, and the persecutions of Antiochus that lead up to it. First well, I won't go into all. Let's just say these martyrdom stories are only in Second Maccabees. They are not in First Maccabees. Okay? And it gives some flesh, I guess, pardon the expression, but it gives some flesh to the effects of these decrees of Antiochus that included forcing people to worship Greek gods, not circumcise their children, and their males, and then also eat pork. Not just in certain restaurants, but just no pork at all. All right. This one, the guy's not even, well, you'll see he refuses even to eat, seitan or impossible pork. All right. If you hear carefully. All right, so who'd like to read about Eliezer? All right. Oh, do we have the microphone, or it's not working? All right, just be loud.
One of the most important scribes, a man of already advanced age and very good looks, was forced to open his mouth and eat pig's meat, but he preferred a glorious death to a life of defilement and walked out on his own accord towards the drum, spitting out the meat in a way required by those who remain steadfast in avoiding those things not right to eat for people who love the right life affectionately. Those who were posted at the unlawful eating of innards.
Yeah, innards, yeah.
Took him aside because of their long acquaintance with him. They encouraged him to bring meat prepared by himself that he could take, and to act as if he were eating the sacrificial meat decreed by the king. If he did that, he would escape the death penalty. Thus he would be granted a favor because of his old friendship with them. But he started a civilized argument, which was worthy of his many years and superior old age and remarkable gray hair he acquired. His splendid behavior from childhood onward, and even more of the holy law established by God. Accordingly, he quickly responded by saying that they could send him to Hades, since it is not worthy of my years to pretend, so that many of the young people would think that Eliezer, at the age of 90, had gone over to the way of life of the Gentiles. And they, because of my acting as if for a brief period of extra life, would be led astray because of me, and I only would win a defiled and blemished old age. Since even if I would avoid the punishment by humans now, I cannot escape the hands of the Almighty, alive or dead. Therefore, I will prove myself worthy of my old age by departing this life now as a man and leave behind the noble example of my dying happily, eagerly and nobly for the revered and holy laws. After he had said these things, he went straight to the drum. They who had just previously behaved in kind fashion turned hostile because of the words stated, which were stupid in their opinion. When he was almost dead because of the blows, he sighed deeply and said, "For the Lord who possesses the holy knowledge, it is clear that I could have been discharged from the death penalty, and that being martyred, my body undergoes heavy tortures, but my soul gladly suffers the ill. And this person died in this way and left behind, not only for the young ones, but also for most others of his people, an example of the greatest nobility and a distinct memory."
So how's the story of Eliezer? How's it similar and how's it different from the speech attributed to Iphigenia? Mm-hmm. So excellent point. So first of all, similarities that they both indicate clearly that they're willing to die. By the way, if you look at the modern use of martyr today, sometimes it does people use it to refer to people who are not dying willingly. But in at least in its origin, yes, they are willing victims.
Talk about people who died in the Holocaust as martyrs, they didn't choose to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so people in the Holocaust are referred to as martyrs and did not choose to do that. What else? Similarities are, yep.
I mean, we talked about the lack of a clear reference to an afterlife in Iphigenia's case. And here, he does refer to the afterlife, but in a very sort of oblique way. Sending me to Hades, and only sending me to Sheol, sending me to the underworld, without any indication that this is going to cause him to have life in the world to come. That's not spoken of here. And rather, he talks about his example.
Yeah, so there's no reference to this world to come, to an afterlife. Instead, he's going to Hades, which is the Greek translation of Sheol, right, which is, we don't really know much of what goes on there other than we know it's cold, right, because when Saul raises Samuel up from the dead, from Sheol, he's wearing a coat. It's true. It's just something I cannot wrap my mind around, but anyway, but where do we see him having an everlasting, where is his immortality of a sort? Yep.
His immortality is different
Mm-hmm.
because he is dying for principles. He's dying because of his belief in God, in belief of the law, and that he does not want to dishonor his Judaism. And that's what's different between that and the first story, because it has nothing to do with morals, but rather more with war and allowing the Greeks to succeed.
Okay, so he's dying for the principles. He's defending God and God's Torah, okay? And he's not trying to defend the Jewish nation. Yes?
However, by doing that, he does defend the Jewish nation because he does say that, if you eat it, then everyone will say, doesn't matter, I don't have to do it either, and so then the laws aren't followed, and so the Jewish nation is lost. So, in a way, it's different, but both, you're talking about continuity of a culture in both stories.
So it is defending the Jewish nation in the sense that, a little bit obliquely, in that by encouraging people to follow laws, that'll preserve the Jewish nation. But if he ate the pork, he won't even, but even if he looks like he's eating the pork, which is an interesting point, right? He could make the fake meat or kosher meat, but make it look like pork. I don't know how you do that, but I guess, look, you can do that. I mean, I know you can make pork look, you can actually make you can do that, like the crab meat, right? That substitutes for shrimp. Or crab meat, I mean, that's made from fish, right? That you can still eat at sushi. So, yeah, right. But anyway, so that he right. So he is preserving the nation in that sense by preserving the law. And at his age, right, it would look ridiculous for him to suddenly give up the law. Everyone else would think this is pointless. Yes, and then okay.
What's different here is that he is upholding his own nation, not trying to defeat Antiochus. In her case, she's trying to propel the Greeks to defeat the Trojans.
Excellent point. So Iphigenia is trying to help the Greeks defeat the Trojans. Here, he's not trying to defeat the Greeks per se. He's just, and notice, by the way, and that's a great point, because notice that there's a difference between martyrdom from people and groups that are in power and those who are marginalized and not in power. And that's the case in Maccabees. And martyrdoms, we'll see the stories of martyrs take place when people are not in power. The memorialization of them, the telling of them, can happen whether a group happens to be in a comfortable or not in a precarious situation. So we'll see the Christian martyrdom stories. Actually, the martyrdom cults become very popular in the 4th century, when actually it's easier to be a Christian after the rise of Constantine. So it's very interesting, but that's a very important point, is to note the marginalization, the weakness, the lack of dominance of the groups that are engaging in martyrdom. Mm-hmm.
The other thing I wanted to point out was that she wasn't trying to offer an example for others to live by. She was trying to win a victory, but wasn't saying, and countless Greek virgins like me will do this and offer themselves up in the future. He is trying to offer himself as a paradigm for behavior, and that's different.
Yeah, so he's offering himself as a paradigm for behavior. Iphigenia is not. She is trying to raise, there is this future component to her, which is to raise the status or respect for women, which is not a bad thing, but she's not trying to encourage people to die so that the Greeks can win. Although you could, I suppose, argue that it's kind of inspires the Greek soldiers to be more willing to die, but it's a different type of, I think, situation. But anyway, yeah, he's really advocating for obedience to the laws and Jewish traditions, and she's advocating for perhaps a respect for women, but also just a Greek victory over one discrete time and one discrete situation. Yes. Okay, so it's interesting that it's... Yes, so he's doing it for the kids, for the children. So, I mean, that's a great observation. Why? How might this be appealing to children?
It's a good legend.
So stand up for your beliefs. It's a story that could resonate. I mean, some cultures do tell rather disturbing stories to kids to get them to behave properly.
It's a messianic story. Here was the guy who did this for us.
I mean, more like, it's sort of like, how could you go out to Buffalo Wild Wings when Eliezer was willing to die so he didn't eat treif?
Yeah, because he's not a replacement. He's not trying to do something for someone else.
Yeah, so he can be used as an example of why other people should follow the dietary laws. Okay, yes.
It's interesting that whereas Iphigenia is young, Eliezer is old, he comes across and says, well, I've lived my life, and even though I have, he wasn't all that powerless either. He had friends in high places. He kind of says, well, I could have gotten myself out of this, but I want the young people generally to fear older people. When they see older people doing something, they're really older.
So he's old and had friends in high places, so he had a lot to lose. I want to move on to other stories, but but you can read the next story, which is the young people, okay? And they also die too, and the mother and her children, and she encourages them to do that. By the way, Clytemnestra, she was not really down with Iphigenia getting herself killed, and let's just say that Agamemnon had a very unpleasant bath when he came back from Troy, thanks to Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. Anyway, it's a very tragic house. But the mother in the next story becomes an important legend as well, of the mother of these 7 children. So there are young people who do it too. The other thing I'd point out with Eliezer is that you'll notice that there is a Greek sort of influence on this story, because it does very much reflect the story of Socrates, someone dying for their principles at a very old age. And he makes exactly that same argument, right? To not be willing to die at an old age for your principles shows that you care more about your life than your principles, knowing that, and by the way, age 70, or I think he's 90, right? So, but Socrates is 70. I mean, 90. I mean, he's talking about maybe a couple of days, right, that he has left. So, or maybe more, but, you know, from his point of view, it seems kind of silly, whereas the principles are eternal. All right, so we're going to skip ahead to, let's see, let's do, we'll do page 5. Okay, so this is one of the earlier Christian martyrdom stories of Polycarp. Which one? The children? I mean, it's there. I mean, it's pretty. Yeah. I mean, well, we'll come back to this too. Yeah, we'll have a little time to talk about that. But let's do the Martyrdom of Polycarp. Here, I'll read this one, and then we'll talk about it a little bit, and then we'll go on to the rabbinic one. Yeah, they did not fix him with nails, but bound him. He put his hands behind his back and was bound. He was like an eye-catching ram taken from a great flock for sacrifice, a well-prepared burnt offering, welcome to God. He looked up to heaven and said, O Lord, Almighty God, Father of your beloved and blessed servant, Jesus Christ, through whom we have received knowledge about yourself, you are the God of angels and powers and the entire creation, as well as every generation of righteous ones who live in your sight. I praise you that you have deemed me worthy this day and hour to be numbered among the martyrs by drinking the cup of your Messiah, leading to a resurrection to eternal life of soul and body in everlasting communion with the Holy Spirit. May I be received among them today in your sight as rich and acceptable sacrifice as you yourself have prepared earlier, revealed beforehand and fulfilled, O unerring and truthful God. Therefore I praise you in every respect. I bless you and honor you through the eternal and heavenly high priest, Jesus Christ, your beloved servant. Through him be glory to you, with him and the Holy Spirit, now and in coming ages. Amen. And after he sent up the Amen and had finished his prayer, the people at the stake kindled the fire, a great flame flashed forth, and then we saw a miracle. To us it was given to see, and we were also saved to tell the others the event. The fire took the form of a vault and bellied out through the wind like the sail of a ship. It walled all around the body of the martyr. He was in the middle of it, not like burning flesh, but like bread being baked, or gold or silver being refined in the furnace. And we perceived an overwhelming sweet smell like the smell of frankincense or another of the costly aromatic herbs. So how is this story different or similar to the previous two stories that strike you? Yep.
There's already a culture of sacrificial death.
Mm-hmm.
And Polycarp is following the example of Jesus and indeed participating in the miracle of Jesus' death and resurrection.
Yeah, so he's similar to Jesus. Notice, though, it's Jesus adjacent. It says, right, they didn't fix him with nails, but they bound him. So he's close. And you're supposed to think of him as a Jesus-like figure, although not exactly the same. And that is a way for him doing kind of imitation of what Jesus did. So notice that the specifics of it are going to, and that's how he connects to his tradition, obviously, is through his relationship with Jesus. Were you going to say something, Matt?
I think he's not approaching it with this, that death is a finality of the other two.
Yeah.
He's saying, I'm moving on to eternal life. And I'm going to I guess that implies, a better place.
Yeah, so there's a different theology here, right? Yeah. He's going to go to a better place. He's going to have this eternal life of his soul. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
But to me it seems almost necessary that the account include a miraculous element to hammer home the certainty of that. Because we see that. We didn't see any miraculous elements in the other stories. Although we could argue, well, the ships get through, don't they? So
Yeah.
But here, there is this immediate miraculous thing that happens, and that seems to be part of the telling.
Yeah, so there's a miraculous element, that's part of the telling. And what's the miraculous element?
With the fire, that he's not, he's not burned. He doesn't. It's not this sort of awful, terrible death where smelling burning human flesh. It's
Yes.
sweet savor unto the Lord.
So you know that a martyr is legit
Right.
if if it's the smelling, the flesh actually burns in a different way. And that reflects the holiness of that individual.
Right.
That's different. And by the way, it is also an allusion to the story book of Daniel, Meshach, and Abednego, and they also in the fiery furnace. Which, by the way, that story, that book of Daniel, is written around the time of the Maccabees, even though it's set in an earlier period. But that's a martyrdom averted, right? Here, he's still martyred. Yep.
One thing I'm missing here is, where is the martyrdom? He didn't refuse the easy way out and die for a principle. Is there something in the story about this guy Polycarp that we don't know yet?
Well, he was a prominent person, Bishop of Smyrna, and he was dying because he was condemned by the Roman authorities. And so, he was, and so if you didn't deny your Christianity, then that was how the governor in this particular area, the governor of this region, decided to handle the Christians. Yes. But he wasn't denying being a Christian. So, and the other thing I would highlight about him too is that, I don't know if you've noticed it so far, but it seems like, every martyr has to give their speech, right? They get to have a spiel. And when we study it, it's valuable because we get to see the reason and the justification for what they do. But the other thing that's very important about martyrdom, it has to be public. And the speech is one element of that. Polycarp is paraded through the city. Iphigenia, it's a very public sacrifice. Eliezer, right? His whole story doesn't make sense if it's not public, right? Because he could eat, the Greeks don't want him to eat the pork privately. So, that connects to the point of why they're doing it. It's not just for themselves. It's also to show publicly their devotion to the principles of that group. So we'll now skip to the rabbinic version, to a rabbinic martyrdom. Okay. Let's see. There's some really good martyrdom stories here, which one is of a woman who becomes a man. It's fascinating. All right. So let's go to page, it's page 10. So this is the Talmudic version of this story. Who'd like to read? Okay, go ahead.
And you shall love the Lord your God. It has been taught. Rabbi Eliezer says, if it hasn't been said with all your soul, why hasn't it been said with all your might? And if it has been said with all your might, why has it been said with all your soul? If there is a man whose body is dearer to him than his possessions, for him it has been said with all your soul. And if there is a man whose
why are you fleeing? They said to him, because of the nets which men cast for us. He said to them, may it be your will that you come up to the dry land, and we shall live together, I and you, in the way my ancestors lived together with your ancestors. They said to him, you who are said to be the smartest of animals, you are not smart, but you are a fool. If at the place of our life we are afraid, how much more so at the place of our death? We too, if now, as we are sitting and occupying ourselves with the Torah, concerning with it, which it is written, for this is your life and the length of your days. Our fate is thus. How much more will it be so if we go and desist from it? They said, it was not even a few days later when they arrested Rabbi Akiva from the prison, and they arrested Papas ben Yehuda and imprisoned him together. He said,
All right, there we go.
He said, Papas, who brought you here? He said to him, happy are you, Rabbi Akiva, that you have been arrested on account of the study of the Torah. Alas for Papas, for he had been arrested on account of idle things. They said, when they brought Rabbi Akiva out for execution, it was time to recital the Shaman. And they were combing his flesh with combs of iron. And he took upon himself the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. His disciples said to him, our rabbi, even to this point? He said to them, all my days I've been troubling myself about this verse. With all your soul, this means, even if he takes your soul. I said, when shall I have the opportunity to fulfill this? And now I have that opportunity. Should I not fulfill it? He prolonged the word one until his soul departed at the word one. A heavenly voice went forth and said, happy are you, Rabbi Akiva, that your soul departed at the word one. The ministering angels said before the Holy One, blessed be he, this is the Torah, and this is its reward. The dead ones, your hand, O Lord, from the dead ones from the pit. He said to them, their portion is the life. A heavenly voice went forth and said, happy are you, Rabbi Akiva, for you are summoned to the life of the world to come. And there we go.
So here is a classic example of a Jewish martyrdom story. How is this similar or different from the previous martyrdom stories? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I love the parable about the fish. You know, it's a fish out of water is dead. A rabbi without the Torah is dead. Without our Torah, we don't have life. Torah is life. So you're, you know, you stay with it. Yeah, I mean, you know, you defend it to the end.
So you have the parable of the fish, right? And a rabbi without Torah is like a fish out of water, and there's no life without Torah, just as there's no life for a fish without water. So in a way, he's already martyred, right? Once the decree, he's forbidden to teach Torah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, and actually, there is a similarity there to the other, like, in the Greek one, you know, if she doesn't sacrifice herself, Hellas will be dead. And so she'll be dead. I mean, they won't have it, they'll lose that life. And in the other one, with the Maccabees, you know, if he's the fourth, he won't have any self-respect. I mean, he's dead to himself.
So in the case of Iphigenia, she's dying for the Greek principles, which are different from Jewish principles, but they are Greek principles, the national values, right? And he is also here, it's Torah. What about the way the story is told? How is it different from the other stories? It's very rabbinic.
There's a
Yeah, what's very rabbinic about it? Oh, yeah? There's dialogue, yeah. There's discussion. Also, he quotes Torah. He's kind of like, it's a midrash. He's an explanation of Torah that he's also physically able to do. He's like, I always wondered how to interpret this. Now I know. And then he says the Shaman and dies on the word one. So he's really able to do that too. So it really validates and strengthens the value of Torah, not just by saying it, but also by showing it, and how it's pretty amazing and powerful that he ends his life by studying and interpreting Torah. And that's, by the way, that little sort of dialogue with Pappus, and Pappus says, I just got arrested for doing dumb stuff. You actually got arrested for something meaningful. And that, which to a certain extent goes back to the original ones, that your life has meaning when you are spending it doing things that are of the highest importance. And even if you have to die for them. All right, so I'm going to conclude with, any other thoughts or observations?
I'm going to just totally off the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So many years ago, Sonia and I were in Peru, and when we were in Peru, we saw the frozen girl, and this was a young girl who had been sacrificed to the sun god so that the Aztecs could continue their life. But once again, the idea of sacrificing a girl, leaving her there to feed the appetite of the gods, would then protect the Inca society.
Well, and they were willing, they went willingly too.
Say that again, Sonia.
They said that the young people went willingly.
Willingly.
Yeah.
So these are great points. So they went willingly in the Aztec culture. So we still have these same patterns. Notice that also Akiva is very willing, right? Also, but notice one thing that the Akiva turns on its head is that the public nature, the emphasis on the public aspect of it is not him dying so much as his teaching. That's what has to be public and available, which a little bit of a nuance in the way it sort of uses the traditions of that tale. Yes?
There's a little bit of selfishness in this. If I don't do this, I won't be able to live with myself.
Okay, so there's a bit of selfishness. If I don't do this, I can't live with myself. And we've seen this in the story of Eliezer, right? Yes. Yeah, it's strong. I'm not sure I'd say strong. It's certainly there. Yes. Notice, yes, absolutely. There is that, and it's very clear. It's a very clear belief in the afterlife here. But notice it's put in the context of the angels. By the way, I think they asked, it's a question, right? This is Torah, and this is its reward.